storytelling.
This is the only way.
That was just snapped in half.
Acknowledge me.
To streaming platforms.
Netflix will become the home of WWE's Raw.
And I might potentially be seen as the day cable guy.
To promotion crossover. It feels like everything in WWE is changing, but is it all for the better? Let's first talk about the premium live events, the PLEs. We first have seen that these PLEs are changing and have changed, even in the last year it feels like. The pay-per-view model with WWE has definitely changed, and now we are seeing these PLEs going from 7 matches, 10 matches for 3 to 4 hour times with the pre-show. And now we are seeing condensed 3-hour shows, sometimes even like 2 hours and 50 minutes, it feels like, and getting maybe 5 matches on the card. And the other thing that is happening over the next couple of years, and I believe that this will continue to be a trend with WWE, is we're seeing the PLEs go from 1 night to 2 nights. WWE's WrestleMania has already been a 2-night affair for several years now. I personally do like that model of having the biggest show of shows on the grandest stage of them all, 2 WrestleMania nights, 2 main events. Feels like a big show instead of like a 12-match 8-hour slog that we got years ago. It's way more balanced and it's a lot more fun because it's a whole weekend. They're doing this with SummerSlam. We know that SummerSlam is going to be converting over to a 2-night affair. If SummerSlam is going to be a success over 2 nights, I personally think that WWE is going to continue this trend in this model and take their big core 4 PLEs and make them into 2-night affairs. Imagine if you got 2 nights of the Royal Rumble. Night 1 for the women's, night 2 for the men's, or vice versa, whichever's more popular. Survivor Series could be a 2-night thing. Even if you want to rope Money in the Bank in there, which is a 1-night thing, we get 2 ladder matches, you could space that out and give us 5 matches and a Money in the Bank on 1 night, and then on the Sunday night, you could give us 5 more matches and another qualifying Money in the Bank match. But the question to you is, do you see that happening and continuing? Will WWE, will Triple H continue this method, and will they go for the big core 4 or 5 PLEs and convert them into 2-night programs? And do you like the 5-match model that they've been going with? Very similar to NXT Black and Gold with the takeovers, where they were smaller shows, condensed, but they allowed the matches to breathe. The other big change that we have seen, and I have personally noticed this recently, is that with these shorter PLEs of having 5 matches on the card, the go-home shows for Raw and SmackDown really do feel like the pre-shows. Highlight packages, hyping up Bash in Berlin, or hyping up SummerSlam, but you're getting larger matches, feuds culminating on SmackDown. Typically on a SmackDown go home before a PLE, we're getting a big story beat, or we're getting tag team title match, or the women's title match is going to headline SmackDown. Instead of putting it on the PLE and making it one of the matches on the main card, they're already there for especially these international shows. When they're overseas, they take SmackDown, for example, overseas with them. And so you have that large crowd in the big arena. And so the SmackDown go home especially feels like a big show to watch. Now, I don't always like this as a fan because I want to see a lot of the feuds culminate or continue at the actual PLE, at the actual main event, and not necessarily the SmackDown before. But it really starts to feel for me that they have taken the pre-show model and they said, let's not do that. Let's not give fans an hour, 2 hours of a pre-show at a PLE. Let's rather do it on the go homes before that, and we can utilize the TV side of it. It's not necessarily a massive change, but it's definitely one that I think WWE is gonna keep hammering home, especially as they continue to expand things in the international markets. It just makes sense. Now, speaking of expansion, WWE is expanding into Netflix in 2025. In January, we are going to see Monday Night Raw make its way over to the streaming platform. And to me, this is going to be the biggest change for WWE. Moving away from USA Network is a big deal. And moving away from traditional cable programming, it's also going to be a massive shift for the audience. I think that a lot of us are underestimating what this will mean for pro wrestling, what this will mean for WWE programming by having just even the one flagship show over there on Netflix. This deal is going to be very long. It's going to be for like just the if they like it, they're going to re-sign it for like 20 years on Netflix. Netflix wants that live sports feel, that programming on their platform. And I think it's only a matter of time that we see everything make its way over to the streaming platforms like Netflix, where you get Raw and SmackDown and NXT and the PLEs all wrapped into one. If things work out for Netflix and WWE, viewership goes up, engagement is up, the programming is there, I think it's going to be one of the bigger changes we see over the next decade for WWE. Yes, we still have NXT on regular television, moving over to the CW. We have SmackDown currently going over to the USA Network and getting away from Fox. But with Netflix happening in January, it's where I think we are going to see a lot happen in WWE. And I think for the storylines we see week to week. Changes to advertising, how matches even flow. What will things look like? Will we get more aggressive language? Will we go into more of a PG-13 or give us more adult themed storylines for some of these sagas that Triple H puts on? Will the show still be 3 hours that we know it, or will it round down and be an hour and 45 minutes or 2.5 hours? We just don't know. But it's a change in model, and I think it's exciting, but also it's going to be interesting to see how fans react to such a big change for Monday Night Raw, and how WWE changes the way it produces stuff, which is another big point here, is the changes in production WWE has done since Paul Levesque has taken over completely for WWE, and they've updated and changed even the people that are at the helm when it comes to production. Kevin Dunn is gone, and we don't get the crazy zooms in actions all every single freaking 5 seconds anymore. Stuff tends to breathe. They're giving you more insights into the characters. They are trying to shoot this where they have people moving backstage and then out through the curtain, and you are getting a live experience and feeling like it's all around you and you are part of the entire story and what's going on with the fans. You are more engaged within what you see. Even visually, it feels a little bit more engaging. The way Triple H has seemingly produced a lot of the stuff backstage, it really feels like you're trying to create more cohesion with storylines, with characters, where it is not just insert interviewer, talk for a minute, and then end segment off screen. There are moments where people are backstage talking, and then there's even more stuff happening in the background, little Easter eggs. It's not all perfect by any means. Triple H has said in interviews too that it's trial and error, and as they move to Netflix, they're gonna try even more things and try new ways to film and shoot their TV program. But has that been a positive change? We're so used to how things are produced for WWE for like our entire lifetime. All the matches are branded and sponsored. The ring has got Prime all over it. Little things like that matter to some and don't matter to others. As long as the product is good, people generally seem to be happy. Now, something that doesn't seem to be trial and error, we're talking about the partnerships between NXT and TNA. This first started to happen when we see the likes of Mickie James return when she was still under contract with TNA, and she returned at the Royal Rumble. Then we'd see Jordynne Grace pop up at the Royal Rumble. We started to wonder, how is this going to change? What's going to happen here? Are we going to see a little bit more crossover? Well, now that we are leading NXT into the CW era on television, we have seen more and more TNA talent show up on NXT programming every single week. Joe Hendry is more popular now than ever with the expansion of NXT, its growth, and him being on their program almost every week has been a really good thing. New signings for WWE into the NXT system, but the crossover with TNA and getting Jordynne Grace and getting Joe Hendry, I think we're gonna see more and more of this as time goes on. And this is one of those changes that I think is an actual positive because it's well balanced. And maybe in the future, we see other folks from TNA cross over to NXT. Maybe we see some former WWE legends and superstars make their way over, like the Hardy Boys, who are currently in TNA. It's a great way to keep the influx of talent there, to keep things fresh. And it's a partnership that I think it's gonna be a win-win for both. Okay, this next one, I don't have a good segue for, but it's storytelling in WWE. One of the big changes that I have noticed as a fan for the last few years now, and particularly when we had the introduction of the Bloodline storyline, and that was still under the helm of Vince McMahon, but once all of that ended, it has all been under Paul Levesque and his team. And as Triple H has taken over full creative and running all the week-to-week television, WWE is focused a lot more on saga and long-term storytelling, long feuds, long story arcs, and sometimes it's a little bit too slow. Sometimes it's taking way too long to get to the next story beat, and we end up with a lot of filler. This is one of my critiques when it comes to SmackDown, where I feel like there's just not a lot of story happening there. The roster feels thinner, and there doesn't seem to be much focus, and stories seem to take a little bit longer than they need to. Versus Raw feels energized and has way bigger stories going on and multiple people involved in multiple different acts. It feels more fluid on Monday Night Raw. Could it be that they're putting more emphasis on Raw because they are going to, one, temporarily move Raw to USA Network, and two, they're going to be setting up for their eventual move to Netflix, trying to really beef up the programming, the star power, and the intrigue on Raw versus that of SmackDown, where we just saw it end on Fox, and now it's going to be the permanent home on USA. But the long-term storytelling of the Bloodline, the Judgment Day, Punk, Drew, Seth, the Wyatt Six, Cody's story with Solo and the Bloodline. The long-term saga storytelling of WWE, I think, has been very good, but I do feel that there are some instances where it's taking a long time for some of these stories, and you miss a little bit of quicker pace, title belts changing more often, more wrestling for your top stars instead of just promos and straightforward storytelling. I love the storytelling aspect in pro wrestling. Whether it is the actual in-ring where people are putting on phenomenal matches and telling stories in the ring during the matches, or it's going to be more outside of the ring and it's the theatrics and it's the stories that they are telling between each other. For example, Punk and Drew McIntyre. I've loved that story arc we've had for almost a year now. But sometimes it just feels like it's getting a little bit too long, or they miss the mark, where things with the Bloodline seem to slow down. For some fans, Cody's story since WrestleMania has been kind of lukewarm. Some fans feel like they're a little bit bored of Cody's current story, and that seem to be almost waiting for when the next big story beat is going to happen to really kick things off. This is one of the big noticeable changes that I see as a fan of watching WWE for like my entire existence, is how the storytelling is starting to change, and I think it will continue to evolve. And as they see what works and what doesn't, I think we're going to see more of that type of storytelling happening, where it's not just going to be a 3-month program. We're going to see stuff to carry on for a year, and they introduce another character and more elements to the story and different components to the stories outside of just the title belt, which is another aspect of the big change I've noticed for WWE, is that it's not always about the title. There are some rivalries and stories that are just based off of personal feuds. Some are just going to be based off the titles, but some they start bringing in other elements here of what they represent. Not everyone likes it, and that's okay. But things like CM Punk's bracelet has been a storytelling device for the feud between him and Drew McIntyre for many months, and we've seen Drew McIntyre now break the bracelet, and that part of the story is now over, and they're not going to be utilizing that. We see the Ulafala for the Bloodline as a big storytelling element and piece that they use to drive the narrative, to drive the story forward. It's good to me because it's getting beyond just, I want title, I want to be number one, so I'm going to fight you. And then they get into a program for 3 weeks and then it's over. But one of the big changes that I have noticed with WWE, and this has been going on for probably a few years now, but I definitely have noticed it in the last 2 years with Triple H really running things, and it is the way the WWE has utilized top talent. We talked about how the PLEs are shorter and you get 5 matches on a card with the premium storylines that they're telling, and that's great, and some people want it longer and give you more matches and so on. But with those superstars, I noticed that a lot of the top talent, from Rhea Ripley, Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, Randy Orton, Liv Morgan since winning the world title, CM Punk, Drew McIntyre. A lot of the top talent in WWE don't wrestle every week. And to me as a fan, this is one of the changes that I've noticed that I'm not a huge fan of. I want talent to be happy and healthy and wrestle for a very long time, and sometimes the stories that they tell without wrestling are very, very interesting. You get moments like Cody and The Rock backstage and outside in the rain talking about Mama Rhodes. You get cool moments like that. But on week-to-week programming, sometimes it feels like a bit of a slog when Cody Rhodes is just doing the same promos over and over and the Bloodline are talking. Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest are just talking and running interference throughout the matches. Liv Morgan becomes world champion, and now I can't remember when's the last time she wrestled on TV. More and more often, it feels like WWE moves these top talents into a position where, since they are going to be at almost the very top, they wrestle less and less on TV. And as a fan of wrestling, I like when they mix it up between the two, where you do get moments of just sending people home with a segment with a storyline element at the end of a show. But I also miss times where you would get your top talent in a tag team match at the end of Raw. Or on SmackDown, it would be Cody one-on-one with 1 or 2 people of the Bloodline. Put Cody in a handicap match against the Bloodline on SmackDown. On a random Friday night. Put Liv Morgan on TV and wrestle somebody else for that week, and then you could still tell the story in the ring too with the rest of Judgment Day and Rhea and Damian Priest. Have Drew McIntyre wrestle on TV. It's something I noticed in the shift in philosophy and how they're doing it. It doesn't mean it's wrong, because WWE's attendance, they're selling out arenas every single week, their PLEs are on fire, they're getting the massive gross in attendance and marketing and sponsorships and everything. They're on fire right now. But I definitely noticed that there are a lot of changes, and there's probably even more that we haven't even hit on. Has WWE's programming changed for the better, for the worse? Where do you sit with it? If you want to talk more about Triple H and how fans are kind of split on his overall booking philosophy, click this video right here. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. See ya.